So I don't know if you can tell, there's like a little bit of a halo over my head today. I asked them to increase the intensity of this light directly above me, just so, no. I missed you guys the last couple of weeks. Oh man, it is good to be back with you. I will say that in my absence, I know that it was just absolute fire. The Aganyas 2 weeks ago, bringing the story of what God has called them to, and the expectation of what God is pushing or pressing them forward into. And I guess I got to start with thanks. Thank you for being incredibly generous to the Aganyas. I haven't seen the total results of it, but obviously just an incredible blessing, an offering towards the Aganyas on that first week while we were gone. And once I have the total, I'll be able to get my mind around all of it. But just thank you so much, because it set them up with a great offering from Praise in order to impact them and to set them on a good platform moving forward. When I heard their story, I knew I needed to share their story with you. And so thank you so much for just your faithfulness in that. That was 2 weeks ago, and they did a great job, fantastic service. And then last week, Jeremiah Hembry brought the message and did such a good job. I am so thankful for the Hembrys. They are such a blessing to me personally. They are an encouragement to me, and I would not say that if he were here. So because he's gone, I can say those sorts of things because he kind of said some things with me being gone, and so now I can say whatever I like. And so if he were here, I would never be so nice. But with him being away, man, they are such an encouragement. If you want to know as a pastor what is encouraging is when there are people who have been pastors, who have a heart for pastors, who become a part of the church, and just encourage every step of the way. And so I'm thankful for the Hembrys, and he brought an excellent message last week as well. The trip itself, if you don't know, we took 33 people to Israel. And when I say we, my goal was to, and I set this up ahead of time, was to do as little as possible. I wanted to absorb. And so on the trip, I already did once, but I want to publicly commend Richard Hahn, who took the leadership of the trip from beginning to end. When we started envisioning what this might look like several years ago, I asked him if he would take the lead, and he said yes. And that started this process, and he was able to handle all of those things so that I could just go and be a sponge and just absorb and take in. And transparently, as I was going, I said, man, I need to be filled. I need to be filled. This needs to be a filling trip for me. And so just from me, thank you to Richard Hahn. And if you see him, say thank you to him for all that he did as part of that. But we were gone for 10 days on this trip to Israel, and it was so good. We've had a few international trips in the last 4 months, Elizabeth and I, and this one was more of a jet lag issue than the last one. We got back, and it was funny because I had jet lag while I was there. Thursday, I adjusted in time for Saturday to come home. And so and then every morning up at 2 a.m., every afternoon, 2 p.m., you can ask the staff. This last week, if you tried to talk to me after 2 p.m., you probably could get whatever you wanted out of me. So, I might have to re-examine some of the decisions I've made. But it was just more so. There was some difficulty. But as far as the trip itself, I had high expectations. My expectations were not high enough. It was a profound, that's the word that I keep using, profound trip. It was profound. It was the type of thing that originally I guess I expected that it was going to be a bucket list type thing for me. One time, go, come back. Having come back, having gone, and man, I just really believe that this is something that I want others to participate in as well. See, as Christians, we don't have to make a pilgrimage. Okay, you have to go and do this thing and you have to do it so many times. That's not our experience. But when I was there, it gave some texture to some things. And coming out of the trip, I found myself just ravenously reading the Gospels again. And that, to me, is an indication of just a time of filling while I was on the trip. So it was so good. I'm not gonna show you a slideshow in spite of what might have been promised last week. That would bore you, so I'm not gonna do that. But there were some things that I just know that as a result of, I just believe we're gonna go on a trip again, take another trip as a church. And for those who weren't able to make it this time, wish that they had, maybe you'll have another opportunity here. The thing that maybe struck me the most, the time that was most impactful for me was the time around the Sea of Galilee. The time in Jerusalem was very interesting, and it was meaningful in its own way. But the time around the Sea of Galilee was something incredibly special. And I don't know if others have had that same experience, but one of the things that a lot of people had told me ahead of time, there was, some people who had just gone, and I was struck by how small it all is. I don't know if others have had that same experience. When you go, and when I pictured the Sea of Galilee in my head, I always kind of pictured Lake Michigan, which is a great lake, right? You cannot see across this thing. But the Sea of Galilee is about 1.5 times the surface area of Stockton Lake. So it's much smaller than you expect. And the majority of Jesus' ministry happened within a very small area of small cities, I guess you could call them big towns, small cities there within that area. And that time was incredibly meaningful. Even this week while I was reading, and I came across this passage that I want to read with you today because it really, it speaks to kind of where we're at, where we need to be going, where I personally am, and all of that in light of kind of maybe what the Holy Spirit spoke to me while I was on the trip. It's in Matthew, because according to this passage, the majority of Jesus' ministry happens in that small area, and Matthew talks about that small area, Matthew chapter 11. So if you grab your Bibles, open them up to Matthew chapter 11. We're going to start reading in just a moment in verse 20. According to Matthew, many, maybe most, of his miracles happened in a small area. Okay? And so from that, Jesus begins to speak to that area in particular. Okay, Matthew chapter 11, verse 20, here's what it says. Then he began to denounce the cities where most of his mighty works had been done, because they did not repent. When Jesus started his ministry, he starts after John baptizes him. He goes out in the wilderness. When he's out in the wilderness, he's fasting and praying. The enemy comes and tempts him. Satan tempts him. And then he heads back north to Galilee to start his ministry. And again, the vast majority of it happens in this area. We know that his first miracle is in Galilee. It's at this little town called Cana. It's where he turns water into wine. Then he heads back over to the Sea of Galilee. And the majority then of his ministry happens right there. And Matthew points out 3 cities in particular. He points out Capernaum, Chorazin, and Bethsaida. Of those, while we were there, we visited 2 of the 3. And the reason why we didn't visit the third is that it's not 100% where exactly Bethsaida is. There's one site that says, hey, this is Bethsaida, and then there's another site, and our guide was someone who had done some of the archaeological digs on the other site, and so he wanted to really promote the idea that that was actually Bethsaida. But we don't really know which one actually is Bethsaida. But we had gone to 2 out of the 3 of these cities. Capernaum and Chorazin we had gone to. Bethsaida we didn't. And what struck me was that in this little evangelical triangle, is what some people call it, in this small little area, the vast majority of Jesus' ministry and his miracles happened. And in an area where at one point we were standing at the top of a hill, which may or may not have been the place where Jesus did his Sermon on the Mount. We don't really know. But as we were standing at the top of this hill, you could see Bethsaida here. You could see Capernaum over there. And if you looked, you could just see Chorazin up over the ridge. It was incredible to see this small little area where the vast majority of Jesus' ministry had happened. And in that area, in Bethsaida, Peter, Andrew, and Philip were from Bethsaida, and then they moved to Capernaum. Capernaum in particular, you see healing after healing. Peter's mother-in-law was healed there. The centurion comes to Jesus there and asks to have his servant healed. The ruler's daughter is healed there. Just outside Bethsaida is where the leper is cleansed. Back in Capernaum is where the woman with the issue of blood is healed. There's a lot of stuff happening right there. In fact, it says that more happened there than maybe even like the rest of Galilee, according to this passage. That the vast majority happens in that one little area, definitely more than Nazareth, because remember, when Jesus goes to Nazareth and he sits down in the synagogue after reading from Isaiah, and he says, "This is fulfilled today," and they're all like, wait, we know you. And Jesus says, "Yeah, and I'm sure you're kind of going to quote this proverb to me. Let me tell you this. I will not be able to do as many miracles here as I did in Capernaum," he says, "because of the fact that you do not believe, because you do not have faith." And then they take him, they grab him, and they bring him to the top of a mountain or top of a precipice, and they get ready to throw him off, and he walks right back through them, and he heads back to Capernaum. And everywhere in Israel, everywhere, almost everywhere, where Jesus does something, there's like a church there now. So even if they don't know for sure where Jesus did something, there's probably a church there at this point. And actually, the churches probably started like 300 AD, right? When Christianity becomes the religion of the Roman Empire, then or Constantine promotes religion or the Christianity, then like the first churches are formed, right? And then those churches are destroyed, and another church is built on top of that, and then that church got destroyed, and then there was another church built on top of it, where in a lot of these sites, there's a church on top of a church on top of a church. It's really very interesting. And some of the occasions where we went, and some of you who've been there know this, that some of the places you go, there's like one church that there's 3 churches in. And they're different denominations. One's Roman Catholic, one's Armenian, one's Greek Orthodox, and they all share this space, and they have little different wings, and you can go into one wing and see one experience, and into another wing and see a different experience, and they're all the same church. When we went to Nazareth, there was 2 churches of the Annunciation. Annunciation just means the announcing, right? So the place where they believe that Gabriel appeared to Mary, there's 2 churches. There's the Roman Catholic Church, that is at the Church of the Annunciation. And then there's the competing Greek Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church of the Annunciation, that's off in the distance, right? And so we had an opportunity to visit the Roman Catholic Church. And underneath you can see a cave where probably was Nazareth home, and there was a church built on top of it, and so they built it, like truly, that same kind of layered thing. And while we were sitting there in Nazareth, and I was thinking about the Annunciation, and I was just standing there as the guide was speaking, and I was looking up at the hills all around that Jesus would have looked up at as a kid. And that struck me. And then that one of those hills, they would try to throw him off of. And that struck me even more. And I asked, can we go to the Mount Precipice, which is the name of the mountain that they conceivably, it's not 100%, but probably was the one that they tried to throw Jesus off of when he said, "This is fulfilled in your presence, and I won't be able to do the same miracles here that I did in Capernaum." And I asked, I said, "So is there a church there?" And they said, "No." I said, "Well, why isn't there a church on Mount Precipice?" I guess that's not something you want to remember, right? And what would you even call that church? The other ones, you've got like the Church of the Annunciation. You've got the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That one would have to be like the church of the attempted murder. You know what I'm saying? Or, I don't know. But I wish I could have. I wish we could. I didn't get to go up to that Mount Precipice and see that spot because there isn't a church and there isn't a bunch of houses in the area yet. It's kind of barren. And I wish I could have seen it because it is such a reminder of the fact that when you are around something so much, it is so easy to take it for granted. That when you are so exposed to something, it is so easy to lose appreciation for it. And this can happen with anything good. It can happen with a good marriage. It can happen with a good family. It can happen with a good church. It is easy to take something good for granted and then to start focusing on all the things that you don't have. And that's why gratitude is so important. Because gratitude heads that off at the pass. It doesn't let you get that far. Start taking good things for granted. This can happen with anything good. Even can happen with Jesus. Maybe specifically happens more so with Jesus. When you are around something so good for so long, somewhere along the line, it can maybe have less impact on you. And the longer and the more that you're around it, there is more danger that you will completely miss it. And that's what happened in Nazareth. And that's a reminder for me, oh God, when I have been raised in the goodness of God, may it always bring me to gratitude and never, never, never allow me to get callous to it, hard-hearted to it. So Jesus calls this out. In Capernaum, in Chorazin, and in Bethsaida, he just flat out calls it out. He says, I've been around you. I've been speaking here. I've been healing here. I've been doing miracles here. I've been delivering those who are demon-possessed here. And you now have missed it. He says the reason why is you've not repented. Verse 21, woe to you, Chorazin. Woe to you, Bethsaida. For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. Tyre and Sidon, he compares them to Tyre and Sidon, which were the worst. I mean, the worst. You want to know how bad they were? Listen, they were on the West Coast. I don't need to say any more. And truly, in the full sense of the term, they had it good. They had wealth. They had luxury. They had all of those things. They did not have God. And so he compares these little cities in Galilee to Tyre and Sidon, which were cities that Jesus wouldn't even have stepped in being an observant Jew. Right? So he says that these cities were like them. He says, in fact, you're worse than them because you had more revelation than them. You saw my miracles. They didn't, and now you're the worse for it. Verse 22, but I tell you, it will be more bearable on the day of judgment for Tyre and Sidon than for you, which shows something incredibly important, that the more revelation we have, the more we are held accountable for. The more we know, the more truth we hear, the more truth we are held to account on. And that's a big deal when you put that alongside of the more you're around something, the more easy it is to take it for granted. Right? You've got this juxtaposition of the fact that, and kind of, it seems like counterintuitive. Like the more you're around something, the more easy it is to take it for granted. And the more you know, the more you hear, the more you learn, the more truth you have revealed to you, the more you are accountable for. And that's what he says right here to them. He says, man, it's worse. It is more tolerable on the day of judgment than for them than for you. And then he continues on. He hits Capernaum in particular. Verse 23. And you, Capernaum, will you be exalted to heaven? You will be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Sodom, if it had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. Capernaum was Jesus's base of operations, right? He bases out of Capernaum for his ministry, for the majority of it. And now he compares Capernaum to Sodom. He said, what's worse than Tyre and Sidon? Well, Sodom. And he says, Capernaum, man, you guys think you're going to be exalted to heaven. And there's some question, and probably where that phrase, exalted to heaven, seems to be like a catchphrase for Capernaum. That phrase in particular, because it shows up exactly the same in Luke, talking about Capernaum. It seems to be like this is a catchphrase that they use of themselves. Like they've got it so good. This is a rich little city, and it's almost like this is their bumper sticker that they're putting on their donkeys' behinds about Capernaum, exalted to heaven. This is their phrase. And there's even some indication that maybe that's at least partly because of the fact that Jesus was basing out of Capernaum. Oh man, Capernaum's got it good. And now we even got Jesus, and he's one of us. We are exalted to heaven. We're rich, and we got Jesus too. He's ours. It's like Jesus is their mascot. It's kind of like some of us think, like the Chiefs, right? I'm not going to hit the Chiefs, anything like that. But you're like, man, Pat Mahomes, he's my boy. Pat Mahomes has no idea who you are. He doesn't. You're a Chiefs fan, and so then it's like, he's mine. Like he's not. He's his own man, right? And in the same way, they're like, oh, we got Jesus. He's our mascot. It's kind of like us in Springfield, Missouri. Anytime I'm trying to explain Springfield, Missouri to somebody who's not from Springfield, Missouri, when we went up to Upper Peninsula, Michigan, I was trying to explain what Springfield, Missouri was. What do you think the three things I told them were? Brad Pitt, Bass Pro, and Cashew Chicken. The 3 stars on the Springfield flag, right? Like, or at least it should be. Like, at some point I'm going to make a formal motion with the city council. Those 3 stars need to stand for Bass Pro, Brad Pitt, and Cashew Chicken. That's ours. It's us. It's who we are in Springfield. And Capernaum was like, man, we're exalted to the heavens. And Jesus says, I tell you, it'll be more tolerable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom than for you. Why does he say all of this? Well, back to verse 20. He began to denounce the cities where most of his mighty works had been done because they did not repent. Now, wait a second. When we were in Jerusalem, I was down in the old city, and while we were there, like if you've ever been to the old city in any town anywhere in the world, there's like a shopping district. And that shopping district is exactly how you would imagine a shopping district in the old city, right? Like stalls either side of it. And you go to one stall and you think, oh man, they have something you want. And you're like, oh, I'm going to negotiate because I know how to negotiate. And they look at you like you have no idea what you're doing. In fact, they told us at one point, one of the shop owners says, you Americans do not know how to negotiate. Like when we set a price, you're supposed to offer 10% of that. This is what this person said. Others who were there in the room will say the exact same thing. 10% is what you're supposed to offer. You guys don't know how to negotiate. So I tried to negotiate after that. I had one shopkeeper. This is in the Christian quarter, okay, who cussed me out. I said, I am a pastor, sir. Anyway, so I didn't buy from that guy. I'm not really good at it. But one thing I did do, I was trying to bargain and get killer deals, and you think you get a killer deal, and then you go to the next shop, and everybody has all the same stuff. It's not like you get unique stuff in each shop. It's all the same stuff, right? And so I go to one shop, and I'm like negotiating. I'm like, man, I got a killer deal. And I go to the next one, it's like half price. I am not good at this game. So anyways, one of the things I was looking at getting is Claire is easy to buy for. You just get her notebooks. She loves notebooks, right? And so Asher, though, is much more complicated. Like, what does Asher want? And so we decided to get him a chessboard. And so we go find this chessboard for him, and we find this beautiful wooden chessboard with mother-of-pearl inlay and built by hand in Syria, which just means that they pulled off the made in China sticker off ahead of time. But So I find this thing, I get it, and the guy's like, oh, you get such a good deal. And then I go next door and I find it for less. And again, but I knew he would love it because Asher loves chess. And I don't know how this started. Somewhere along the line, I didn't teach him how to play. I think he must have learned it at Wings or in school or something. I don't know exactly. But he loves to play chess. Liz got him a book that was How to Beat Your Dad at Chess. She didn't buy me a book, How to Beat Your Son at Chess. But he loves it. And every time I move, he responds. And every time I make one move and he doesn't respond, I tell him, it's your move. Every action opens the door for his action. Every time I move, a required response is necessary. It's his move. And every time God moves, we must respond. The last time you see the word repent in Matthew is 7 chapters before this. It's from the very beginning of Jesus' ministry. It says, and Jesus went and began to preach, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And then it's not mentioned for 7 chapters. You do not find the word repent until right here in chapter 11, verse 20, where after doing all of these miracles and preaching all of these sermons, he says, you saw it all and you did not repent. Anytime God moves, a response is necessary. Anytime he moves, we must respond. They didn't respond to Jesus' miracles. They didn't respond to Jesus' teaching. Some did, but not all, not en masse. You'd think they would respond. Small area. Jesus is there. He is doing miracles. You cannot get away from it. They even changed their bumper stickers as a result of it. And yet, they do not respond by repenting. So what is Jesus saying here? There is a sin that is worse than the sins we put at the top of the pile. Worse than the sin of violence and murder or immorality is the sin of indifference. The sin of indifference is when we see God doing something and we do not respond to it. Jesus gave them every opportunity, and those miracles God was doing all along the way required a response, and they did not respond. The Israel trip was truly moving for me because it gave a new texture to my understanding of Scripture. And from that, and what God did in me in it, a response is necessary now. I told you, I came back and I've been like ravenous for reading the Gospels again. And you know what I've been doing? I've been opening up the Gospels and I've been opening up Google Earth. And I've been reading these things as I'm looking at the texture of the land again and figuring out what this actually looked like for Jesus. It's an incredible thing, but that passion will wear off. The excitement will wear off if I do not respond to God's calling. When he moved inside of me, the response is, dig back in, Alan. And right now I can't wait to finish up the Gospels and get back to the Old Testament, because I want to reread the whole thing again and see it again with fresh and new eyes. Anytime God moves, a response is necessary. God reveals something to us, we must respond. And if we don't, we're worse off than if he had never revealed it in the first place. That's what Jesus is saying here. He continues, and he says, at that time Jesus declared, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and the understanding and revealed. You hear all of this. Revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Jesus revealed this to us. Now look at the response he is looking for. Come to me. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I love these verses, and these verses have formed for me the foundation of my understanding for what God has called us to. Jesus' invitation to us. He invites us to come to him and to find rest in him. And this was the invitation to Bethsaida and to Chorazin and to Capernaum. This is the exact same invitation to them, and they missed it. And this invitation is to all of us. Because look, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. This is what the response was supposed to be. This is what repentance looks like. Come to him. And right after this story is the story of Jesus' disciples walking through the field and picking the heads of grain as they're walking through the field, and somebody sees them and says, what are you doing? It's the Sabbath. And then right after that story is Jesus going into the synagogue, and there's a man there with a withered hand, and he says, stretch out your hand, and it was healed. And again, this is a healing that was happening on the Sabbath. And so very clearly, he is tying together this story with the story of his healing on the Sabbath and what is allowed on the Sabbath. I was warned before I went to Israel that there were certain things I need to be prepared for on the Sabbath. And I knew that this was going to be the case, but then I was still kind of shocked by it. Number one, on the Sabbath, which starts on Friday at sundown through Saturday at sundown, you need to be prepared that several of the elevators, at least, we had 3 elevators in our hotel, 2 of them became Sabbath elevators. Now, if you don't know what a Sabbath elevator is, it's an elevator that the buttons don't work on. If you want to get from one floor to the next, and it is the Sabbath, what you're supposed to do is stand there and wait. And this elevator will go to the top floor, open for 1 minute, then go down to the next floor, open for 1 minute, go down to the next floor, so you don't have to hit a button and do work on the Sabbath. So I was prepared for that. So in order to not do that work on the Sabbath, we carried our back all the way up the 4th floor, on the stairs, all the way up. I'm not sure it was less work, but whatever. I was prepared for that one. I was also prepared, and this one's much more serious, but on the Sabbath, they make their coffee makers rest. I know. I said the same thing. You go to the restaurant in the hotel, and there's coverings over all of the coffee makers. It's the Sabbath day. And so, of course, I want to know more about this. I'm like, wait. Is it like we got to give the coffee maker rest? Like, what is it? Is it that I can't hit a button, and can't you make it automatic or something? So I came prepared. We brought 2 AeroPresses with us and our own little collapsible water pot. And I'm like, in the mornings, in the dark, because it was 2 a.m., right? And I'm waking up in the morning, I'm like, time for my coffee. And I'm like pouring in the dark and sometimes pouring on my hand. But I got myself some coffee. But on Sabbath, while others were drinking other coffee, I was able to have good AeroPress coffee. Okay, thank you for that round of applause. But what it was, I actually looked it up. It's not that you can't hit a button on the coffee machine. It's not even, the problem is, specifically, the separating of the things you want from the things you don't want. So the filtering process of running the water through the beans and then filtering out the beans, it is like a sifting, which is forbidden on the Sabbath. So if you wanted to, you could drink coffee that had all the grounds in the bottom of it still. And in fact, they served instant coffee on the Sabbath. And I saw some poor saps drinking that. But why is that? It's because a teacher several decades ago said, well, that's a sifting, and you cannot do that on the Sabbath. As I was trying to research the elevator thing, first hit, or one of the first hits was Rabbi Shmuel Strauss in 2009, who wrote an entire book on why the Sabbath elevator should be forbidden. Because just by standing on the elevator, you are providing a counterbalance. And it is thus work and should be forbidden. There's an entire book with engineering explanations and diagrams. And when I first read that, I chuckled. And I said, come on, we're missing the point, right? But these people are trying to do what they can to apply their faith in today's world, where buildings are 25 stories tall. And so what Jesus says is, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. And if you come to me, I will give you rest. These verses here are very closely tied to Exodus chapter 33, where Moses has this monumental task to lead the people of Israel. And he says, I can't do this alone. It's way too much for me. And he says to God, who are you going to send with me? And God promises Moses, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. God said, I will be with you, I will go with you, and I will give you rest to Moses. And Jesus opens it up for all. He says, come to me, all who are labor or heavy laden, who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. This is the first move we always make in the invitation that Jesus Christ gives to us. But it is not just the first move. It is every successive move after. This is also very closely tied to Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 16, which says, thus says the Lord, stand by the roads and look and ask for the ancient paths where the good way is, and walk in it, and find rest for your souls. And they said, we will not walk in it. What does he say? Stand by the roads and look and ask for the ancient paths where the good way is, and walk in it, and find rest for your souls. For Jeremiah, this was a matter of walking on a daily basis a certain way, on certain paths. And as a result, in the midst of all of it, they would have rest. And this should be our response every single day. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Verse 29, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Take my yoke upon you, that's work language. Learn from me, that's work language. Rest for your souls is in the midst of the work. The yoke is work, the learning is work, and in the midst of the work, just like Jeremiah, as they're walking the ancient path, there is rest. Jesus' promise of rest is not passive. It's not sitting on an elevator as it brings you to the top. Instead, it is a matter of walking the right path, wearing the right yoke. There is work, there is learning, but in the progression of all of these things, there is perfect rest. And all of that movement is just further into that perfect rest. You want to know what your faith is about, growing and progressing as he does something in you, as you're around him a lot, and you continue to progress in your faith. The progression of faith should be always deeper into rest. What I mean by that is this: your faith should grow. Your trust in him should grow. And as a result, the rest for your soul should grow as well. Maturity is movement, is something we say around here. It is moving in response to his call. But in all of that, the foundation is the promise of rest. I don't know where you're at. I don't know exactly where you are in your faith. I know where I am. And we come from all kinds of different backgrounds and even just phases of life. There's people in here who are in school, young adults, young marrieds, those with young kids, those with older kids. There's empty nesters, there's retirees, there's seniors in here, widows and widowers. And every phase of life carries with it its own challenges and its own burdens. Every phase of life is unique in the fact that every single one of them is something where it is easy for us to turn away from what we know to be true. And in every phase of life, there is an invitation back into his yoke and his burden, which is light and easy. And there's a wide range of us in different backgrounds. Some of us who work in an office, and some who work with our hands, some who work in education, some who work in the trades. It doesn't matter what specifically, but every single one of us have been called to move forward in our faith, to progress. And sometimes we can lose sight of what that actually looks like. It's so easy to get into a rut. Okay, what's my next step? What do I do next? Where do I go from here? What do I do to continue to grow? Alan talks a lot about growing and knowing Christ Jesus and pressing into him. What does that actually look like? It looks like him doing something and us responding to it. Him moving, and now it's our move. Now it's your move. This series is really just going to be about challenging us in our faith, challenging us to learn. Are you learning right now? Are you learning in your faith? Because if not, there's a problem there. Are you praying? If not, you'll be challenged to pray. Are you pursuing? If not, you will be challenged to pursue him. Do you worship? If not, and not just in this room, but I'm talking about on your own. If not, you will be challenged to worship. Do you give? If not, you will be challenged to give. Do you serve? If not, you will be challenged to serve. To love. If not, you will be challenged to love. But all of those things are not the ends in and of themselves. All of those things are about moving deeper into rest for your soul. You get what I'm saying? Giving is not about getting your money. It is about removing the burden of the god of money from your back and finding rest for your soul. Serving is not about just getting you to fill a gap here at Praise. It's about recognizing that Jesus Christ served because he came to serve, not to be served. It is about removing the burden of self-absorption from your back and finding rest for your souls. All of these things are about pressing further into rest. Why? Because that's his invitation. Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. And he said, come to me and you will find rest for your souls. So as you progress in faith, man, don't lose sight of the progression, of the growing, of the knowing him more. Don't take it too easy and get into a rut and find yourself in a place where Jesus is just your mascot, just your bumper sticker. Instead, press into knowing him because every move requires a response. And he has moved in your life, and he has been good in your life. Don't risk the sin of indifference, because the rest he offers is not inaction, it is rest in the midst of action. Are you growing in your faith today? Because if not, there's a problem. But as you hear that, don't hear that as somebody who needs to check some boxes. Hear it as an invitation from Jesus Christ, who has poured into your life and expects you to respond by coming to him and finding rest for your souls in him. That's what it's all about. And that's his invitation. I'm going to invite you to stand with me. Jesus said, come to me. And even though from chapter 4 all the way through chapter 11, it doesn't say repent once, it's all through it. Turn, go a different way, respond, the move is yours. And Jesus says that. Jesus says it's your move. I've done what I'm going to do here. What's your response? Come to me, and you will find rest for your souls. I'm going to invite our prayer team to come down to the front. I want to pray, and as I do, I also want to pray in such a way that I leave space for an invitation. I want you to hear the invitation of the Holy Spirit. It took me a long time to respond to the invitation of the Holy Spirit. I didn't respond until I was 18 years old, and I had heard it plenty of times, but I never responded. But that Holy Spirit kept knocking on the door of my heart and saying, come to me, come to me. Come to Jesus and find rest for your souls. And that is his invitation to you, whether you've responded before or not. It is an invitation that goes out every single day. Find the ancient paths and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. Jesus says, come to me. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. These things are for you. And so today, if you've never responded to that, the invitation is for you. Jesus Christ is the only solution. He is the only way. There is no hope but in him. And you will continue to wear the burden of sin on your back until you come to him and receive the salvation that he offers. That sin can only be removed by Jesus Christ. And so, to Capernaum, to Chorazin, to Bethsaida, he came over and over and over again. And every time he moved, there was a calling to respond. And you have an opportunity to respond as well.